The baby shower was perfect. Gilded balloons grazed the ceilings of our Tribeca loft. Champagne flowed freely. And my husband, the tech billionaire Julian Croft, had his arm wrapped lovingly around me. Everything was perfect. Until she walked in. His assistant, Amelia, wearing a white dress so pristine it rivaled my own. Julian laughed it off, calling it an inside joke. "Don't be dramatic, darling," he whispered. But when the time came to cut the 5-tiered cake and Amelia's hand reached for the knife beside mine, the joke unraveled into a nightmare that would expose every lie I was living. The air in our Tribeca loft was thick with the scent of peonies and old money. It was the scent of my life, a fragrance I had grown accustomed to, much like the gentle weight of Julian's hand on the small of my back. Today that weight was a little heavier, a little more possessive. It was the day of my baby shower, and Julian was playing the part of the doting husband to perfection. "Isn't she glowing?" He'd boom to anyone who would listen, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space of our home. Our friends, a curated collection of New York's elite, would murmur their agreement, their eyes flicking between my burgeoning belly and the dazzling smile plastered on my face. I was Eleanor Croft, wife of the tech mogul Julian Croft, and I was for all intents and purposes the luckiest woman in the world. I had the handsome husband, the sprawling apartment with panoramic views of the Hudson, a wardrobe filled with clothes I'd only ever dreamed of, and now a baby on the way. A little boy, the ultrasound had confirmed a future heir to the Croft empire. The theme of the shower was "A Star is Born." A touch on the nose, perhaps, but Julian had insisted. Silver and gold balloons floated towards the 20-foot ceilings, catching the afternoon light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music a genteel backdrop to the clinking of champagne glasses and the low hum of conversation. I moved through the room, a ship in full sail, navigating the currents of polite society. I accepted congratulations from women with faces stretched tight from too many cosmetic procedures, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. I thanked them for the ridiculously expensive gifts. A cashmere baby blanket from Hermes, a miniature Aston Martin from some obscure European toy maker, a lifetime supply of diapers that probably cost more than my first car. My best friend Chloe caught my eye from across the room. She gave me a small, conspiratorial smile, a silent acknowledgement of the absurdity of it all. Chloe was my rock, my tether to the person I was before I became Mrs. Julian Croft. She was a struggling artist who lived in a tiny walk-up in the East Village, and her presence at the party was a welcome breath of fresh air amidst the suffocating perfume of wealth. "You're holding up well," she said, squeezing my hand when I finally made my way over to her. I would have started throwing things by now. I laughed a genuine laugh that felt alien in this carefully constructed world. "It's almost over," I whispered, leaning in close. "Just a few more hours of this, and then I can put on my sweatpants and eat a whole pint of ice cream." "That's my girl, Chloe," said her eyes twinkling. "Just try not to let any of these harpies get to you. They'd kill for a life like yours." I knew she was right. On paper, my life was perfect. But lately, a nagging feeling of unease had started to creep in a tiny crack in the flawless facade of my gilded cage. It was the late-night phone calls Julian would take in his study, the hushed conversations that would stop the moment I entered the room. It was the way his eyes would sometimes glaze over when he looked at me, as if he were seeing someone else. I had tried to ignore it, to dismiss it as the anxieties of a first-time mother. but the feeling persisted, a dull ache in the pit of my stomach that even the most extravagant gifts and declarations of love couldn't soothe. The party was in full swing when she arrived. The string quartet had just finished a Vivaldi piece, and there was a momentary lull in the conversation. The double doors to our apartment swung open, and a woman stood silhouetted in the doorway. She was tall and slender, with a cascade of dark hair that fell over her shoulders. She wore a white dress, a simple, elegant slip of a thing that clung to her curves in all the right places. It was a dress that would have been appropriate for a summer wedding or a glamorous cocktail party. It was not a dress for a baby shower. A collective gasp rippled through the room. All eyes were on the woman in the white dress, and then as one they turned to me. I stood frozen, my hand instinctively going to my own dress, a pale blue confection that had been custom-made for the occasion. The woman in the white dress smiled a slow, deliberate smile that sent a shiver down my spine. She walked into the room, her heels clicking softly on the polished hardwood floors. She moved with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Julian. "Julian, darling," she said, her voice a low, husky purr. "I hope I'm not too late." Julian, who had been in the middle of a conversation with a group of investors, turned at the sound of her voice. A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, crossed his face before he quickly composed himself. "Amelia," he said, his voice a little too loud, a little too jovial. "What a surprise. I didn't think you'd be able to make it." He walked over to her, his movements stiff and unnatural. He placed a hand on her arm, a gesture that was meant to be casual, but looked anything but. "Everyone," he announced to the room. "This is Amelia, my new executive assistant. She's been an absolute godsend these past few months." Amelia smiled again, her eyes never leaving Julian's face. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," she said, her voice laced with a meaning that was lost on no one in the room. The tension was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket that had descended upon the party. The string quartet, sensing the shift in mood, struck up another tune, a frantic, discordant melody that only served to heighten the sense of unease. Chloe appeared at my side, her hand a comforting presence on my arm. "Who the hell is she?" she whispered. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "His assistant," I murmured the words, feeling like ash in my mouth. He never mentioned her to me. An assistant who wears a white dress to her boss's wife's baby shower. Chloe scoffed. "Please, the woman is a walking, talking red flag." I wanted to believe that Chloe was wrong, that there was a perfectly innocent explanation for Amelia's presence, for her inappropriate attire, for the way Julian was looking at her. But the knot of fear in my stomach was tightening, and I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that my perfect life was about to come crashing down around me. The party continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The light-hearted chatter had been replaced by hushed whispers, the air thick with unspoken questions and veiled accusations. I felt like an actress in a play going through the motions of a scene that had suddenly gone terribly wrong. I tried to avoid Amelia, to pretend that she didn't exist, but it was impossible. She was a magnet, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. She was charming and witty, with a laugh that was both infectious and irritating. She moved through the party with an ease that I, the hostess, could only envy. Julian, to his credit, seemed to be trying to diffuse the situation. He stayed by my side, his hand a constant presence on my back. He introduced me to people I already knew, his voice a little too loud, his smile a little too bright. He was overcompensating, and it was making me even more nervous. "She's a bit much, isn't she?" I whispered to him when we had a moment alone. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "Amelia is Enthusiastic, he said, choosing his words carefully. She's a brilliant assistant, but she doesn't always have the best social graces. She wore a white dress, Julian, I said, my voice tight, to my baby shower. He chuckled, a forced, hollow sound. I know. It's a bit of an inside joke. She's always trying to one-up me, to push my buttons. It's just her way. An inside joke. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and meaningless. I wanted to scream, to demand a real explanation, but I couldn't. Not here, not in front of all these people. So I just nodded, a silent, unwilling participant in his charade. The cake was a masterpiece, a 5-tiered confection of vanilla bean and raspberry cream, adorned with delicate sugar flowers that looked almost real. It was the centerpiece of the party, a symbol of the sweet new life we were about to welcome into the world. It's time to cut the cake, my mother-in-law, a formidable woman with a will of iron, announced to the room. Julian led me to the cake, his hand on mine, as we picked up the silver knife. The photographer, a man who had been documenting every moment of the party, moved in for a close-up. Smile, you two, he said, his camera flashing. I forced a smile, my cheeks aching from the effort. Julian's smile was just as strained, his eyes darting around the room as if he were looking for an escape route. We were about to make the first cut when a voice smooth as silk and sharp as a shard of glass cut through the silence. Don't forget me, Amelia said, stepping forward. She placed her hand on the knife, her long, manicured fingers covering mine. A collective gasp went through the room. This was no longer a social faux pas. This was a declaration of war. I snatched my hand back as if I had been burned. What do you think you're doing? I hissed, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Amelia's smile was unwavering. I'm just helping, she said, her eyes locked on Julian. After all, I had a hand in making the baby too. The room erupted. The whispers turned into gaps, the gasps into murmurs of shock and outrage. My mother-in-law looked like she was about to faint. Chloe was on her feet, her face a mask of fury. Julian's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and guilt. He looked at Amelia, then at me, then back at Amelia. He was trapped a deer in the headlights, and he had no idea what to do. Amelia, that's enough, he said, his voice barely a whisper. But Amelia was just getting started. Oh, don't be a spoil sport, Julian, she said, her voice dripping with mock innocence. I'm sure Eleanor doesn't mind sharing. After all, she's been sharing you for months. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth. The room was spinning, the faces of my friends and family, a blur of pity and disgust. Get out, I said. My voice choked with tears. Get out of my house. Amelia's smile finally faltered. She looked at Julian, a silent plea for support. But Julian was looking at me, his face a mess of regret and shame. You heard her, he said, his voice flat and emotionless. Leave. Amelia's eyes narrowed. She looked at me, a flicker of triumph in their dark depths. Then she turned and walked away. Her head held high, the white dress a stark, defiant symbol of her victory. The party was over. The guests, not knowing what else to do, began to leave their murmurs of condolence and support, feeling like a mockery. The string quartet packed up their instruments, their music a distant, mournful echo of the celebration that had been. I stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of my perfect life. The balloons, once so festive, now seemed to mock me with their cheerful buoyancy. The gifts, once so coveted, now felt like a cruel joke. Chloe was by my side, her arms wrapped around me. "I'm so sorry, Elle," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I'm so sorry." I couldn't speak. I could only stand there, a silent, shattered monument to a life that had been built on a foundation of lies. The baby in my womb, once a symbol of hope and joy, now felt like a lead weight in my belly. Julian approached me, his face etched with a pain that mirrored my own. "Eleanor," he began, his voice cracking. "I can explain." "Explain what?" I said, my voice a hollow echo of itself. "Explain that our entire marriage has been a lie. That the baby I'm carrying is a product of your infidelity. There's nothing to explain, Julian. There's only the truth." And the truth was a bitter, jagged pill to swallow. My perfect life, my gilded cage had been shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces, a broken woman in a room full of broken dreams. The silence in the loft was a living thing. It breathed in the spaces between the discarded champagne flutes and the wilting peonies. It settled over the brightly wrapped gifts like a shroud. Each tick of the hand-crafted Swiss clock on the mantelpiece felt like a hammer blow against my skull. Julian stood a few feet away, looking utterly lost. The master of the universe, the man who could bend markets to his will with a single phone call, was reduced to a stammering boy in a bespoke suit. "Ellie, please," he said, his voice raspy. "Let me talk. Let me try to fix this. Fix this." My laugh was a harsh, ugly sound that I didn't recognize as my own. "Fix what, Julian?" "The fact that you brought your mistress to my baby shower. The fact that she announced in front of everyone we know that she had a hand in making the baby." I spat the words out, the taste of them vile on my tongue. "Or do you want to fix the last 9 months of my life, which have apparently been a complete and utter sham?" He flinched as if I had physically struck him. "It's not what you think, isn't it?" I stalked towards him, my rage a physical force propelling me forward. "Then what is it?" "Julian, was that just another one of your inside jokes? Was her hand on the cake knife some hilarious prank that I'm just too hormonal to understand? No, of course not. I didn't know she was going to do that. I didn't know she was even coming." "But she's your assistant," I pressed, jabbing a finger into his chest. "Amelia. You hired her months ago. You just forgot to mention her. A woman who looks like a supermodel and apparently shares your bed." "It wasn't like that." He insisted, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "It was a mistake, a stupid, terrible mistake, a mistake." I stared at him, my vision blurring with tears. "Which part was the mistake, Julian?" "The first time you slept with her, the 100th. Was it a mistake when you told her you loved her? Because a woman doesn't pull a stunt like that, unless she believes she has a claim." He had no answer. His silence was his confession. The affair wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a parallel life he had been living, a life in which I was an unwitting, inconvenient prop. Chloe, who had been quietly directing the catering staff to pack up, came to my side. "Eleanor, maybe you should sit down." She shot a venomous glare at Julian. "And maybe you should leave." "I'm not leaving my wife," Julian said, his jaw tightening. "She's not your wife right now." Chloe countered, her voice dangerously low. "She's my friend, and you've just detonated her life. So for the love of God, give her some space before she goes into labor on this very expensive rug." The mention of the baby sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I swayed on my feet, and Chloe's arm was instantly around my waist, steadying me. "I'm calling my lawyer," I whispered the words, feeling foreign and final. Julian's head snapped up. The regret on his face was replaced by a flicker of the cold, calculating businessman I knew he was. "Eleanor, don't be rash. Let's not make this public. Think of the company. Think of the baby." "I am thinking of the baby." I finally shouted the sound raw and painful. "I'm thinking that I don't want my son raised by a law and a cheat. I'm thinking that I'd rather be a single mother than stay in this farce of a marriage for one more second." I turned and walked away from him, each step an agony. I went into the nursery, the one room in the apartment that felt untouched by the day's poison. It was a serene oasis of pale grey and soft white. A mobile of hand-carved wooden animals hung over the crib. Tiny clothes were folded neatly in the dresser. It was a room filled with love and anticipation, and now it felt like a tomb. I sank into the rocking chair, my body trembling uncontrollably. I wrapped my arms around my belly, a protective gesture. My son. He was the only innocent in all of this. He was the only thing that mattered. The next few days were a blur of hushed phone calls and legal consultations. I moved into a hotel, a sterile, anonymous suite that felt both like a prison and a sanctuary. Chloe was my gatekeeper, fielding calls from my distraught mother, my furious father, and a seemingly endless stream of so-called friends who were hungry for gossip. Julian, true to form, had already launched a PR offensive. His spokesperson released a statement about a private family matter and asked for privacy. There were whispers of a troubled young woman with a history of unstable behavior. They were trying to paint Amelia as a delusional stalker, a crazy ex-employee. But I knew the truth, and so did Amelia. A week after the baby shower, a manila envelope arrived at the hotel. There was no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was of Julian and Amelia, taken on a beach somewhere tropical. They were laughing, their arms wrapped around each other, the picture of a happy couple. On the back, in neat, cursive handwriting, were the words, "He told me he was going to leave you. He told me the baby was a mistake." The photograph was a cruel, calculated blow designed to inflict maximum pain. And it worked. The image burned itself into my memory, a permanent reminder of my husband's betrayal. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Jessica, advised me to file for divorce immediately. "We need to get ahead of this," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "Julian's team is already trying to control the narrative. We need to tell our own story." But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The thought of a public, messy divorce of our private pain being dissected in the tabloids was more than I could bear. I was pregnant. I was vulnerable. And all I wanted to do was curl up in a ball and disappear. Julian, meanwhile, was relentless. He sent flowers, gifts, long, rambling emails filled with apologies and promises. He begged me to see him, to talk to him, to give him a chance to make things right. I ignored him. I deleted his emails without reading them. I had the hotel staff send back his flowers. I was building a wall around myself, brick by painful brick, and I was determined not to let him tear it down. One evening there was a knock on my hotel room door. I ignored it, assuming it was room service, but the knocking persisted, more insistent this time. "Eleanor, please, I know you're in there. It's me, Julian." My heart hammered against my ribs. I told the front desk not to let him up. How did he get here? "Go away, Julian," I called out, my voice trembling. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me," he said, his voice muffled by the door. I'll stand out here all night if I have to. I knew he would. He was stubborn, and he was used to getting what he wanted. With a heavy sigh, I unlatched the door and opened it a crack. He looked terrible. His suit was rumpled. His hair was a mess, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold and flat. "To talk," he said, his eyes pleading. 5 minutes. That's all I ask." I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Every instinct was telling me to slam the door in his face. But there was a small, foolish part of me that still loved him, that still wanted to believe that there was a way to fix this. Against my better judgment, I opened the door and let him in. He stood in the middle of the room, looking awkward and out of place. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You have 5 minutes," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. He took a deep breath. "I know I messed up, Eleanor. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way. But I love you. I never stopped loving you." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You have a strange way of showing it." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "I got lost, confused. Amelia, she was a distraction, an escape. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough for you to risk our marriage," I countered. "It meant enough for you to lie to me every single day for months." "I was going to end it," he said, his voice desperate. "I swear to you I was going to end it. The baby. Finding out about the baby. It changed everything. I realized what I had, what I was about to lose." He took a step closer to me, his hands outstretched. "Please, Eleanor, don't throw us away. Let me earn back your trust. Let me be the husband you deserve, the father our son deserves." I looked at him, at the man I had once loved with all my heart, and I felt nothing but a cold, empty void. The love, the trust, the shared dreams. They were all gone, replaced by a mountain of lies and deceit. "It's too late, Julian," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "It's over." His face fell. The hope in his eyes died, replaced by a look of utter desolation. He nodded slowly, as if accepting his fate. "I see," he said, his voice hoarse. "Well, I guess I'll have my lawyer contact yours." He turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He was almost at the door when he stopped and turned back to me. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice barely audible. "The baby. Are you sure it's mine?" The question hung in the air, a poisonous, venomous thing. It was a last, desperate attempt to hurt me, to wound me as deeply as I had wounded him. And it worked. The blood drained from my face. My knees went weak. I had to grip the back of a chair to keep from falling. "Get out!" I whispered, my voice choked with a rage so fierce it threatened to consume me. "Get out, and don't you ever, ever speak to me again." He looked at me, a flicker of something, regret, satisfaction, in his eyes. Then he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the wreckage of our life, and a question that would haunt my dreams for nights to come. Julian's final venomous question was a seed of poison planted in the fertile ground of my insecurity. "Are you sure it's mine?" Logically, I knew it was a desperate, spiteful lashing out. I had never been with anyone else during our marriage. But logic had little power against the emotional onslaught of the past week. The question took root, its thorny vines wrapping around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. It was a masterfully cruel move. He had managed to shift the focus, however briefly, from his betrayal to a non-existent one of my own. He was painting me with his own brush. The days that followed were a descent into a private hell. I replayed every moment of our marriage, searching for cracks I had missed, for signs that I had been blind to. Was there someone else? Had I, in a moment of loneliness or despair, sought comfort in another's arms? The answer was always no, but the question once asked refused to be silenced. My lawyer, Jessica, was furious. This is a classic narcissist's tactic. She fumed over the phone. He's trying to gaslight you, to make you doubt your own reality. It's a transparent attempt to gain leverage in the divorce proceedings. We need to shut it down hard. She suggested a paternity test, a definitive scientific answer that would put the matter to rest once and for all. I recoiled at the thought. It felt like a violation, a concession to his cruelty. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I needed it. Not for him, but for me. I needed to excise his poison from my system. The procedure was simple, a blood draw from my arm and a swab from Julian's cheek. He agreed to it immediately, his lawyer conveying a tone of reluctant necessity. It was all part of his performance, the concerned husband forced to take drastic measures because of his wife's erratic behavior. While we waited for the results, the world outside my hotel room continued to spin. The story of the baby shower had leaked, of course. The New York Post ran a blurry photo of Amelia in her white dress under the headline, "Billionaire Baby Mama Drama." The article was a masterpiece of innuendo and anonymous sources painting a picture of a sordid love triangle and a scorned wife. My parents, bless their hearts, wanted to fly in from Ohio to be with me. I told them not to. I couldn't bear their pity, their well-meaning but ultimately useless advice. I needed to get through this on my own. Chloe was my only lifeline. She came to the hotel every day, bringing me food I didn't want to eat and movies I didn't want to watch. She didn't offer platitudes or false hope. She just sat with me in the silence, a quiet, unwavering presence that kept me from completely falling apart. One afternoon, as we were aimlessly scrolling through Netflix, Chloe's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression darkened. "What is it?" I asked, my voice listless. "It's nothing," she said quickly, putting her phone away. But I saw the name on the screen. Amelia. "Why is Amelia texting you?" I demanded, sitting up straight. Chloe sighed, a look of guilt on her face. "She's been trying to contact you. I told her to go through your lawyer, but she's persistent." "What does she want?" "She says she has something to tell you." "Something you need to know. I don't want to hear anything she has to say." I said, my voice hard. "I know," Chloe said gently. "But what if it's important? What if it's something you can use against Julian?" The thought was a tempting one. I was no longer the naive, trusting woman I had been just a few weeks ago. I was a woman at war, and I needed all the ammunition I could get. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet with her. We chose a neutral location, a small, quiet coffee shop in the West Village. I arrived first, choosing a table in the back corner, away from the prying eyes of the other patrons. Amelia arrived a few minutes later. She looked different from the last time I had seen her. The triumphant smirk was gone, replaced by a look of weary resignation. She was still beautiful, but there were dark circles under her eyes, and her movements were hesitant, almost timid. She sat down opposite me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, my face a mask of cold indifference. She took a deep breath. "I know you hate me," she began, "and you have every right to. What I did, it was unforgivable. Then why are you here? I asked, my voice flat. Because you need to know the truth, she said, her eyes meeting mine. The whole truth. She proceeded to tell me a story that was both shocking and sickeningly familiar. She and Julian had met at a conference 6 months ago. He had pursued her relentlessly, showering her with gifts and attention. He had told her that his marriage was over, that he and I were only staying together for the sake of appearances. He had promised her a future, a life together. I believed him, she said, her voice cracking. I was a fool, I know. But he can be very persuasive. And the baby? I asked, my voice trembling. What about the baby? She looked down at her hands. He told me it was a mistake. He said you had tricked him into it, that you thought a baby would save your marriage. The words were a dagger to my heart. I had suspected as much, but hearing them spoken aloud by the woman he had chosen over me was a new kind of pain. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice hoarse. Because he's a monster, she said, her voice filled with a quiet fury. He used me. He used you. He destroys everything he touches. She reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of papers. She slid them across the table to me. They were printouts of emails, text messages, financial statements. This is everything she said. Proof of the money he spent on me. The trips we took, the promises he made. He's trying to paint me as a gold-digging whore, a delusional stalker. This proves that he's the liar. I stared at the papers, my mind reeling. It was a detailed, irrefutable record of their affair, a road map of my husband's deceit. Why are you giving this to me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You could use this to sue him to get a settlement. She shook her head. I don't want his money, she said, her voice filled with a bitter resolve. I just want him to pay for what he's done. To me and to you. She stood up to leave. He's not who you think he is. Eleanor, she said, her voice a parting shot. He's not just a cheat. He's a dangerous man. Be careful. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me alone with the evidence of my husband's betrayal and a warning that chilled me to the bone. The paternity test results came back the next day. Jessica called me with the news. It's a match, she said, her voice gentle. The probability of paternity is 99.999%. I should have been relieved. I should have felt vindicated. But I felt nothing but a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. The test had proven what I already knew, but it had also solidified the fact that I was tied to Julian forever through this child. That night I couldn't sleep. Amelia's words echoed in my head. He's a dangerous man. Be careful. What did she mean? Was it just the bitter words of a woman scorned? Or was there something more? Something darker lurking beneath the surface of the man I had married, driven by a sudden, urgent need for answers. I got out of bed and opened my laptop. I started digging, going through old files, emails, financial records that I had never paid much attention to before. I started with the company Croft Enterprises. It was a tech behemoth, a darling of Wall Street, a company that had made Julian a billionaire. But as I delved deeper into the company's finances, I began to see things that didn't add up. There were shell corporations' offshore accounts, a tangled web of transactions that seemed designed to obscure rather than to clarify. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew that I had to keep digging. I was no longer just a woman fighting for a fair divorce settlement. I was a woman fighting for her life and for the life of her unborn child. The deeper I dug, the darker the picture became, and I began to realize that Julian's infidelity was just the tip of the iceberg. The real story, the one that had the power to destroy him completely, was buried deep within the heart of his empire, waiting to be unearthed. And I was the only one who could bring it to light. The documents Amelia had given me were a Rosetta Stone unlocking a language of deceit I was only beginning to understand. Cross-referencing her records with the financial data I was pulling from the shared servers, I still had access to a horrifying picture began to emerge. This wasn't just about hiding an affair. This was about hiding an empire built on sand. I spent my days in the sterile quiet of the hotel suite, a bizarre parody of the work-from-home life. Chloe would bring me salads and green juices, her brow furrowed with worry. "You look like a hacker in a spy movie, Elle. Are you sure you should be doing this?" "I'm sure I have to," I'd reply, not taking my eyes off the screen. Julian's company, Croft Enterprises, was lauded for its revolutionary AI-driven logistics software, Nexus. It was the golden goose, the engine of his billions. But the numbers weren't adding up. The reported profits were astronomical, far exceeding even the most optimistic projections for the industry. I found a discrepancy, a small one at first. A numbered company registered in the Cayman Islands, Viridian Holdings, had received a substantial payment from Croft Enterprises for consulting services. There was no record of any work product, no reports, no deliverables. It was just a multi-million-dollar wire transfer into the ether. Then I found another payment to a different shell company, and another. They were all disguised as legitimate business expenses, but they all led to anonymous offshore accounts. It was a sophisticated money laundering scheme, elegant in its complexity. But where was the money coming from? And where was it going? Amelia's documents provided the missing link. Tucked away in her printouts of text messages was a conversation I had initially overlooked. It was a heated exchange about a shipment being delayed at the port of Newark. Amelia. "The contact is getting nervous. He says customs is asking questions. Julian, handle it. Remind him what he gets paid for. Nexus will reroute the container. No one will look twice." Nexus, his brilliant logistics software. It wasn't just for optimizing shipping routes for legitimate businesses. He was using it to manipulate shipping manifests, to create blind spots in the global supply chain. He was a digital pirate, using his own technology to smuggle goods past customs officials. But what was he smuggling? The answer came in the form of an encrypted folder I found buried deep within Julian's personal server. It was labeled Project Nightingale. It took me 2 sleepless nights and a dozen YouTube tutorials on basic cryptography to crack it. Inside were not documents but photographs and ledgers. The photos were of priceless artifacts, ancient statues, Bayet manuscripts, paintings by old masters that were listed as missing or destroyed on international art crime databases. The ledgers were a chilling record of his clients, ruthless oligarchs, shadowy arms dealers, and private collectors with a taste for the illicit. He wasn't just a cheat and a liar. He was a high-tech art thief, a criminal on a scale I could barely comprehend. The money he was laundering wasn't just from his company's inflated profits. It was from the sale of stolen history, of irreplaceable cultural treasures. My blood ran cold. Amelia's warning echoed in my ears. He's a dangerous man. This wasn't just about financial ruin. The people he was dealing with didn't just sue you when a deal went bad. They made you disappear. I thought about going to the police, to the FBI. But who would they believe, the scorned pregnant wife or the charismatic billionaire philanthropist with the city's politicians in his pocket. Julian had spent years building a fortress of influence and public goodwill. I needed more than just a folder of incriminating files. I needed irrefutable proof, and I needed a witness. I needed Amelia. It took some convincing. She was terrified, and rightly so. She had been the one on the ground, the one making the calls, the one who had met with the contacts. She was implicated. "He'll destroy me," she whispered over a burner phone I'd insisted we use. "He'll say it was all me, that I was the mastermind." "He'll say that anyway, Amelia," I argued, my voice urgent. "He's already painting you as an unhinged stalker. Your only way out is to get ahead of him, to expose him before he can bury you." I paused, then played my final card. He's not just a danger to me anymore. He's a danger to my son. He asked me if the baby was his Amelia. He tried to use our child as a weapon against me. I will not let a man like that be a father. Help me make sure he can't hurt anyone else. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then finally, "What do you need me to do?" Our plan was audacious, bordering on insane. The centerpiece of Julian's collection, the one he was most proud of, was a stolen Rembrandt self-portrait, The Scholar. According to the ledgers, it was his personal insurance, kept not in an offshore vault, but somewhere close, somewhere he could admire it. I remembered something he had said once, laughing as he showed me the blueprints for our loft. He pointed to a section of the wall in his study. "Panic room," he'd said. "Completely soundproof reinforced steel, in case of a zombie apocalypse." At the time, I'd thought it was a joke, another one of his extravagant billionaire toys. Now I knew better. The Scholar was in that panic room, and we were going to get it. The final piece of the puzzle was the annual Croft Foundation Gala, a star-studded charity event that was the pinnacle of the New York social calendar. It was scheduled for the following week. It was the perfect cover. Julian would be there schmoozing, basking in the glow of his own manufactured benevolence. The apartment would be empty. Amelia still had her keycard and the security codes. Julian, in his arrogance, hadn't bothered to revoke her access. He probably thought she was too scared to ever show her face again. The night of the gala. I watched from my hotel room as the live news feed showed Julian arriving on the red carpet. He was a vision of charm and confidence, his arm around a B-list actress who looked thrilled to be there. He spoke eloquently about his foundation's work, about giving back to the community. I felt a surge of nausea. My phone buzzed. It was a one-word text from Chloe Go. Chloe was my alibi. She had booked a spa day for us at a resort in Connecticut. Our phones were there with her. If anyone checked, it would look like I was miles away trying to relax and recover. I dressed in black, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I took a cab to a quiet side street, a block away from our building, my pregnant belly, a strange, cumbersome accessory to my burglar's outfit. Amelia was waiting for me in the shadows, her face pale and drawn. She looked as terrified as I felt. "Ready?" I whispered. She just nodded, her eyes wide. Getting into the building was easy. Amelia's keycard worked perfectly. The doorman, a man I had exchanged pleasantries with for years, just smiled and nodded as we walked past. The loft was silent and dark, the city lights twinkling through the massive windows. It felt like a ghost ship, a place where a life had once been lived. Julian's study was at the end of the hall. The door was locked, but Amelia had a key. Of course she did. The panic room was hidden behind a bookshelf, just as I had suspected. It was a seamless piece of engineering, activated by a pressure plate under a specific book, The Art of War. Amelia pressed the book, and a section of the wall slid open with a faint hiss, revealing a heavy steel door with a biometric scanner. "He told me the code was my birthday," Amelia said, a bitter edge to her voice. "He thought it was romantic." Her thumb on the scanner was not enough. It required a 2-person code. His thumbprint and a 6-digit number. "I don't know the number," she whispered, her voice trembling. My mind raced. A number, a 6-digit number that was important to him. Not our anniversary, that was too obvious. Not his birthday. Then it hit me. I pictured the photograph Amelia had given me, the one of her and Julian on the beach. In the background, there was a small sign with the name of the resort, the Azure, and under it, the date of their trip, a trip I now knew had happened while I was in Ohio visiting my parents. I typed in the date 12818. The light on the scanner turned from red to green. The heavy door clicked open. We stepped inside. The room was small and climate-controlled, the walls lined with velvet. And there, on a small easel in the center of the room, was the Rembrandt. It was magnificent, the artist's face, a study in light and shadow, his eyes seeming to follow us as we moved. Amelia stared at it, her face a mixture of awe and disgust. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "It's real." We had a plan. We weren't going to steal the painting. That would just make us criminals. Instead, we were going to expose him. I took out my phone and began to take pictures documenting every detail of the painting, the panic room, the ledgers I had found on his server. Amelia, meanwhile, placed a tiny, almost invisible GPS tracker on the back of the painting's frame. We were just about to leave when we heard the sound of the front door opening. My heart stopped. It was too soon. The gala wasn't supposed to be over for another 2 hours. We heard his voice, and then the actress's giggling laugh. They were coming this way. We were trapped. Julian's footsteps grew closer, the casual click of his dress shoes on the hardwood, a death knell to our plan. Trapped in the steel vault with the evidence of his entire criminal empire surrounding us, Amelia and I exchanged a look of pure terror. The door was still ajar. He was heading for his study for us. My hand flew to my belly, a desperate, primal instinct to protect my son from the monster just a few feet away. This was it. The joke was over. The lie was exposed. And the price for the truth was about to be paid in full, right here in the heart of the Billionaire's abyss. Did we make it out? Did Julian Croft finally face justice? Hit that like button. If you need to know what happened next, don't forget to share this with someone who loves a good story and subscribe to my channel for more real-life drama. You won't believe how this story ends.